Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I am East Forest. How you doing? Happy sunny times in summer. I hope it is that way for you. Even though the world is crumbling and changing, I hope amidst that you're able to just take a breath and get some sunshine on the face. Don't forget, we are plants too. Matter of fact, I was speaking about this. I was just had the episode I recorded with Pete Holmes for his You Made It Weird podcast. Thanks, Pete, for having me on. And he made this really cool animation that he put on his Instagram where I was talking about like these octaves of consciousness, how we're all plants, or we're all rocks, right? We're all physical form. And then we're also plants. Like we need sunlight and oxygen, and that's part of our makeup as well. And then we're animals, sort of like dogs. We benefit from the same things as them, as like structure, exercise, love, walks. And then we're these human beings that can be creative and have senses of humor, and also tap into spiritual consciousness and be able to like witness ourselves and experience non-duality. So we're like this amazing spectrum of consciousness and beingness, but not to forget that we're also these lower octaves. And I don't mean that pejoratively, but to say like all of those octaves are part of what it means to be a human being incarnate. And so don't forget to get some sunlight on your face. I'm serious. Like it's actually important. This week I have a conversation with Sitaram Das. And he is someone I sort of met through the Ram Dass community. He was living and working with Ram Dass for several years, and he sent me a book that he created called From and For God, which is really lovely and beautiful. And I thought it would be fun to be in conversation because not only is it always everyone loves to hear Ram Dass stories, but it's just great to dive into his world for someone who's really devoted on his path and practice. So I think you're going to enjoy this and the vibe that it creates for you as well. Just quickly want to say thank you to everyone who subscribes to this podcast, as well as those of you who have shared it and sent it around the interwebs, this series of tubes known as the internet. Thank you for doing that. And you can also write a review. And if you have any questions you'd ever like me to answer in these intros or during my AMA sessions, a great way to do that is to put the question in the review on Apple Podcasts, and I'll just check those out. But also thank you if you just give it a 5-star. That's cool too. And you can always say hey at team@eastforest.org or at East Forest on Instagram and at East Forest Music on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Those other types of shenanigans that are out there. And one more thing, I released another remix. This one's for the artist Evelyn and also another artist, Sweater Beats. There's a song called All We Have that I did the remix for. I did the remix quite a while ago, and it's finally been released, and I really like it. It's kind of a vibey, spacious piano part. I was sort of thinking about Bruce Hornsby when I recorded it at the time. And Evelyn has this phrase, "This is all we have," that goes throughout the song. And I really focused in on that because it just felt like this presencing tool. And I just really I like how that feels. And I wanted the music to cultivate that feeling too. So you can now listen to that wherever you listen to music. It should be the latest release, depending if you're hearing this currently in a timely fashion, but you'll find it in all of our catalogs on your favorite listening platform. And last thing I want to say is we just got in those new fitted, super comfy, modern sweatshirts, and also these cool women's tanks that have the possible Ouroboros artwork on them by Evan Lorenzen. They look super cool. Rada's been wearing hers around. I've been wearing mine, and it's a wonderful sweatshirt just to put on in the morning when it's a little cooler, and it looks nice, and it's got a great feel. So you can check those out. We just put them up, and while we have those supplies, thought you might want to know about it here in the old podcast community. Just hit the shop at eastforest.org. Okay, well let's dive into this. Let's dive into this conversation with Sitaram Das. Sumiram Bhavana Kumar Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for sending me your book here. Tell me a little bit about, just to start off, this creation. Where it came from, why now, what happened?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, it's really, it feels to me like this kind of community project in a way. I mean, it's all my words, but from my time when I was at Ram Dass's and after leaving the house, just writing has always been a core practice of mine. It's just one of the ways that I make sense of the world, make sense of my spiritual path, make sense of how those two things line up or don't. And over the years, different satsang members, would just kind of say little things like, I love your writings. I wish I could have it in book form. And I'd hear that and go, oh, cool. I had a cool idea. But it just, seemed far off. And I think in terms of right now, why right now, it was just the right combination of different forces. I think actually, realistically, it's, Ram Dass leaving his body just deepened a lot of things for me. And realizing that all of these writings, whether I'm grappling with politics or thinking about him directly, that, really all of it is, my own love song to him, my way of putting those practices into my life. And so I think it kind of came out of my own grieving process, Ram Dass's death. And then the fact that I'm involved in these projects right now with Kripa in terms of, being able to offer free and low cost contemplative and devotional practices to anyone, and the prison outreach work we do. And then also just how invested I feel in Hanuman Maui, just allowing people to continue to come to Ram Dass's home and to continue to have darshan there and experience that loving awareness. And so the fact that I could offer this, if I'm going to offer this book that's a love song to him, I wanted to also have a tangible way to serve him as well. So the fact that the money can go to two causes that are dear to my heart and that feel like they're directly connected to him. Yeah.
So the house where he lived in Maui, you're saying, I've heard, tell me more about the details. It's turned into a place that people can visit?
Yeah. So obviously everything's weird right now with COVID, but the people can still come. It's just, limited kind of capacity. But basically what happened is after Ram Dass left his body, I would say almost all of the caregivers that had been at the house over the last decade just on their own just decided they had to go and be there. And so there was just this beautiful gathering of people, and other people came as well, that just loved Ram Dass and had been in service to him in some aspect. And we're all just hanging out at the house over these few days as Ram Dass's body laid out, and people are coming and going, and all the singing of bhajans, sacred songs, and putting fresh flowers on his body. And through that process, this kind of conversation kept coming up, like, what's going to happen with the house? And the plan at that point was basically, Love Serve Remember Foundation had agreed that they would pay the rent there for a few months, to give Dasima time to kind of sort things out. And she had no intention. She didn't know what she was going to do. She thought she was just going to get some condo somewhere. And for people who might not know, Dasima was Ram Dass's primary caregiver. She was there for 15 years. And
she's a tough lady. Yeah, I remember when I first met her. I just want to interject that when I did meet her, I remember when I flew there to record with him, she was like the last gateway I had to cross. And I fully recognized that it was not a foregone conclusion that I would cross. It's like, I have come all this way. It's been booked. I have permission from the foundation. But I was like, oh, there's still another very important step that I have to let this woman give me the green light. And she has sort of a very tough energy because she needed to. That was kind of her role as like the final gatekeeper. But a really beautiful heart too. And, I really fell in love with her over the times that I go back. So I just want to give that context for Dasima.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful context. And I mean, that's one of the things that's so incredible about her. One of the things that she taught me actually was just that that love doesn't necessarily always look like this lovey-dovey, you know, like just staring into someone's eyes and the really long hugs. And um, sometimes it can look like just that fierceness and that protection. And because that really truly was a manifestation of her love. I mean, she
Yeah.
maybe sometimes she was too hard or sometimes this or that, but she recognized that if she wasn't there, Ramdas would just give him his whole self to every single person that came through, and he had limited energy. It was necessary for her to be protective of him. Um,
She had a role
yes,
to play, and she played it. Yeah.
yeah, and she played it well,
Yeah.
and she's going through her own. I think it's really good for her now to not have to be in that role so much, and she can
Mm.
kind of, yeah, just enjoy the soft space right now. Um, so we're all there at the house with Dasima, who didn't, she had no plans for what she was going to do next. And this question just kind of came up, like, what's going to happen of the house? And there's all these conversations, and I was a part of so many of them. And there was this general consensus that house just emanated with bhav, with the devotional mood, with that presence of loving awareness that Ram Dass embodied so deeply. And as you know, because you've been there, every single wall in every single room in that house is just covered with pictures of Ram Dass's guru, Maharaji, and with
Yeah.
holy beings. It's really infused with love. And being there over those few days with Ram Dass's body laid out, it's hard to explain what happened, but um, it felt powerful and potent. And so this kind of council formed spontaneously after all these conversations, and in that main living room with the big puja table. And it stretched out, as wide as the walls. I mean, it was filled up not with just people visiting Island, but all the people that live there that would come to the house daily, to bring
Mm-hmm.
fresh flowers. And basically the decision was that we should try and find a way to keep the house as a way so that people could continue to come and receive those blessings. And simultaneously, this person, Steve Dahlman, had Ram Dass's blessing to start a Hanuman temple on Maui. And I don't know, did you ever have a chance to go to Stever's little ohana where he had his Hanuman murti made?
No, is that in the North Shore or?
It was. And he
Yeah.
did bring it in the last couple of years. He did bring it, I think, to one or two retreats. It was carved out of monkey pod by a local Hawaiian indigenous carver. And it's a good 3 or 4 feet tall. It's beautiful. So he had this Hanuman Murti made, he had it consecrated, and it was just at his house. And he's trying to find a temple space. And he had Ram Dass's blessing to start a temple. And we know we want to try and save the house. And it just kind of made sense to invite Stever to be a part of it. And so he brought the Hanuman there with the intention of making that the Hanuman temple. And so now it's called Hanuman Maui, Ram Dass Loving Awareness Sanctuary. And I've had conversations now with multiple people who have been there. Some of them that had never met Ram Dass before, had never been in the house before. And they go up into Ram Dass's room where his body had laid out and where he left his body, and are having true darshan. I mean, just moments of just complete heart opening, just complete expansive love.
Did they clear? I mean, is it like a museum? Did they leave it, or did they? What did they do with this study up there?
Um, so specifically, we did not want to make it a museum.
Yeah.
So some things have been left the same, but some things, I mean, it's the point wasn't to create some snapshot. The point was to keep a living space for that energy. So where Ram Dass's body laid out for the 3 days, it was a massage table that was covered with a blanket and his body was on it and it was decorated in flowers. And that's where it laid out. And it was in the center of that living room area. And so that basically tucket is still there, and fresh flowers are still being offered to it daily. And then there's definitely, his chair where he would sit and look out at the ocean, that was kept. That felt like it was important. And and there's a few other things that were kept. I think his books are still on the bookshelf, but some things have changed. The point is to create a space where people can come and pay their respects and have darshan. Yeah,
that's really cool. I'm sure many people will love having that experience in the future. And you lived there for 3 years, is that correct? As one of the caretakers?
Yep. Yeah, I was there. It was about 8 years ago when I left. And then, I'd go back over the years to visit. And the beautiful thing was, if caregivers there needed to go on vacation, see their family or whatever, it would give me an opportunity to go back and just check back in, and I could be of service and spend a few weeks there. So I would do that over the years.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me what it was like being there, and so forth and so on. I'm sure you get asked that a lot. What's it like living there? And when, especially as a caregiver, a caretaker, when you're working with someone in that way, in some ways it strips away the romance of it, because you're really down and dirty with like the base level human and earthly stuff. But on another level, that I'm assuming could bring you really close to the truth in a sense, because there's not many places to hide. Could you speak to that a little bit? Does that experience of those 3 years of doing something so intimate with someone and messy, but also probably so, intimate, it's very close.
Yeah. Well, and how you said that is really well said. And it kind of captures the core thing that I learned from that time, which is that one, I'm sure my mind is still capable of projecting onto anyone at any moment in time. And I'm sure that was still happening, but it definitely stripped away a lot of the projection, right? I mean, as much as Ram Dass tried to tell us he was human, we see him on that stage just beaming in love, and it just doesn't quite feel true. But yeah, living with him, I saw him as human, I saw him get angry. I saw him in the morning when he was grumpy sometimes. I saw him when he struggled with the pain in his body, and I watched him as he struggled with that continuing kind of surrender to dependency, because that wasn't just a one and done thing, right? I mean, as his body kind of deteriorated over the years, he had to surrender to more and more and more dependency. And so I got to see all of that and really see him as a human. And with that, I also got to see that love that he taught and that he talked about, that really was the root of his experience, that it's real. When he talks about loving his wheelchair, loving the pain in his body, as you put in one of your songs, like loving those dark thoughts, right? It's real. Like I saw that he truly just rested in that place of love. One time, this one memory that just comes to my mind, because of his stroke and the aphasia and things, sometimes his sense of time wasn't so great. And one time he came down for dinner into the bottom lanai, the outdoor dining area. And he came down, it was over an hour early. And it was because he got confused. He thought it was about dinner time. And so I went down and I told him, I was like, hey, just so dinner's not going to be for an hour. And, he definitely looked surprised. He said, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll just stay. And I went up and I watched him, and he wasn't meditating. He wasn't sitting like this, in a meditative posture. He was just sitting, just looking out at the ocean in that spot. And he was just truly content. And he was there for an hour. And for me, if I'm going to sit for an hour, there's going to be all sorts of struggle. And, and yeah, I mean, he just really was here, and his heart really was open. And that what it taught me is that loving awareness really is our birthright. It really is who we are. It really is real. it's accessible. Even with our humanity and all of our stuff, that we can still deepen into that the path is real. And from being around him, what anyone who spent time with him saw is that it is a worthwhile endeavor, right? Spending this time cultivating this loving awareness, it is a worthwhile endeavor, because being around Ram Dass, right, we all got to drink that fruit of what that felt like to be in his presence.
Yeah, yeah, well said. I mean, he was reflecting to us what is already there within us. And if anything, he showed me and he shows everyone. Yes, he's a human being, and so are we. It's like, this is not a superhuman feat. It's to
Right.
say, no, we all can do this. You all can embody everything that you might be projecting or experiencing from Ram Dass yourself, and exude that out to other beings in your next breath. Really, it's not, when you say it's your birthright, it's sort of saying, like, I mean, you have it. It's
Yeah.
about stripping away as opposed to putting on. It's not any
Yeah.
kind of clothing you have to put on. It's just sort of like releasing into what is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah, I witnessed, I mean, I only spent really 1 week and then went back 4 times, so little visits. And even in that time, I I remember that how he'd sit in the chair and gaze out the ocean. Frankly, like the whole time we were recording, it would be that, and very patient and very like sort of in between meditation and just pure presence and dreaming. And that's where he's just pulling all these beautiful words out of, and these reveries and these little amazing perfect bits of poetry, and I was just sitting there stunned. Like I didn't think it'd be this good, you know.
Yeah.
It's like this guy is at the top of his powers. He's just behind this aphasia, but the aphasia was meaningless to me because I was like, well, I'm gonna play around with these phrases in the music, and he came alive in the music. You
Yeah.
know, I didn't edit what he said. I just put it into the music and put it into the rhythm, and there it well was. Like, he somehow understood too, like the length it needed to be, and the little arc it needed to be, and little bits of humor. I mean, my favorite line, definitely loving the dark thoughts, but the one that had some humor to it. I noticed he had that Michael Pollan book there, How to Change Your Mind,
Okay.
and this is back in 2019, 2018. So it had just come out. It's just kind of a hotter topic. And I wanted to ask a question about psilocybin. It was this long-winded question about, like it's this movement happening and the cultural shifts and how it could help people and the research. And he's kind of just, waiting for me to finish. And then there's this long pause. And he goes back to the ocean and his bees. And I'm waiting for like him to answer. And the first thing he says is, psilocybin is my friend. And it's like, what a great line. It's hilarious, and then he just goes from there. And it's like, yeah, he's like, let's get a little humor into this. And then he says, like, that started his entire spiritual path. That is not a small statement. I mean, if you really stop and think about that, that's what lit the fuse for the love bomb. And it's profound. It's profound. He really has become the psychedelic grandfather of this country, more so than Timothy Leary to me, because he embodied that elder role as he got older. And I love that it didn't become about the psychedelics. It became about what, as many tools, whether it's yoga or kirtan or whatever else, helps you embody that loving awareness. And that was just one of them.
Yeah. What I loved also about Ram Dass was that, right, because it filled out, right? At first with him, psychedelics was the only way he could access it. And then he found all these other practices, but he never turned away from the psychedelics. He never said, hey, I found this better stuff. He just said, look, this is just one method and there's all these methods. And in fact, have you read the book Zigzag Zen?
No. Is that Alan Watts?
No, you might dig it. It's this guy interviews all the leading kind of Buddhist teachers in the United States and asks them about the role of psychedelics with, if any, for the spiritual path. And there's a whole spectrum of, some people say, yeah, this is what gave me my opening. Some people say, I don't think this has anything to do with the Dharma. Ram Dass was the only person in that book interviewed that said, not only did that start my path, but I still take it sometimes. And I think it's a part of it. And I just love that, you know?
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's really beautiful how the messages continue to pop up in different ways. Actually, here's a perfect example. See this shirt I'm wearing? Check it out.
Yeah, I see it.
What does it say?
Love everybody.
You know where I found this?
Where?
My partner and I went to the mall yesterday. I'll exclude to you why. I was in an Urban Outfitters, and this was on the shelf. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Maharaji and drag. And I'm like, I cannot believe that they took a Maharaji quote and put it on Urban Outfitters t-shirt that was probably made in like Malaysia. But then I think about it more, and I'm like, of course it is that way. You know, it's like, this is for like teenagers, you know, to like wear and skateboard with. And my stepdaughter, who's 17, I bought one for her, and she does love it. And for her, it's like cool. It's like, yeah, like that's edgy. Like, and I'm like, hell yeah, that can be like where the youth is leaning into. And these messages are everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and I think that also points to, I mean, not just Ram Dass, but everyone of that generation and kind of the baby boomers but you know, the Jack Cornfields, and how much they made this stuff just now a part of just the fabric of our culture, you know? Yeah. I mean, that is incredible, you know, it's an incredible thing. And obviously there's still a tremendous amount of work to be done. And our kind of culture and just this deeply rooted individualism, and, you know, we're always trying to kind of co-opt all this stuff and kind of twist it for its own ends. But these messages are so powerful that they're there, and they're really just there for us to kind of open up to them whenever we're ready.
Do you have this book handy near you? Your book?
I should. Yeah. It's like right out of reach, but I can grab it.
Well, I was hoping we could do a reading of something.
Great.
You want to grab it?
Yeah, let me grab it.
So you've got kind of, this is broken up into two parts. There's some stories and prose essays, and then there's poetry in the first part. Do you want to read anything in particular?
Well, I was just going to ask you, is there anything, I mean, I
What about page 22? I just opened to this, and I'm seeing something that has a little meaning to me, but it literally just opened in front of my hands.
Yeah, I love this. I love this poem, so I'll read it, and then I'll be curious to hear what
I'll give you my deep intellectual interpretation of what's happening in your unconscious. Okay.
Okay. So this one's called Whale Moans for Love Scraps. The poets press their faces to the love room's door, begging for scraps from that love affair. One of them catches a love-drunk whiff and cries out, Radha, Krishna. It's as if you can crawl inside of that sound and melt into electrified longing. I will tell you, the philosophers aren't even inside of that house. They hand out leaflets on the street corner and debate the meaning of muffled sounds. Is it one or is it two? Are the waves separate from the sea? But there's no riddle to unlock. No sphinx guards the gate. It swings open wildly on the winds of the lover's cry. And some of those leaflets actually say to go in. I even saw one that said, become a drunk poet and whale moan for love scraps.
Yeah, thank you. It's a bit of a paradox too, which I like. But it's also sort of like what we were talking about at the beginning, how it's available to all of us. You know, loving awareness is the energy that is, as opposed to something we need to figure out.
Yeah.
Or be invited to the party, or have the right whatever, to have been living with Ram Dass, or, you know, whatever it is. tell me about some more background on that one from your point of view.
Yeah. Um, there's a good amount of poetry that I write on airplanes. I think it's just, you know,
Airplanes are a great place to write.
yeah,
They are. I haven't been
they
on one
really
in a
are.
long time, but
Yeah, I haven't either. But no, I mean, it really is because you're just there, and I'm hardly ever interested in the movies that they show. And um, yeah, I'm just there, and my body's always a little bit uncomfortable, and it's just, focus on something. And that was, I was on my way to meet with my brothers in Kripa. So Kripa is a kirtan group that I'm a part of. It's made up of different Ram Dass caregivers. And I spoke a little bit about that earlier, just kind of the service projects we're involved in. But I was going to meet them because we were part of a weekend Bhakti Yoga retreat. Bhakti Yoga meaning the path of love and devotion. So that's kind of all in the context. And I'm going there for this Bhakti Yoga retreat. And something that has been, I've been focused on a lot is we have this idea, actually, I think a lot in the spiritual communities in the West of the way we think of Bhakti Yoga is we often still think about it as like this lesser path, right? It's something that we do so that we can get to non-dualism. But once we get there, we won't need devotion anymore. And just there's this element of, what the Bhakti Yoga texts actually say is that devotion is the whole thing, that the bhav, the devotional mood, is the non-dual state, right? I mean, basically, if we're falling in love with God and God is love, and that loving love, and you could see that there's non-dualism in that, but just realizing that even that intellectual understanding, that's still pulling me out of it, and that because when we're in the bhav, when we're in that loving awareness, none of that stuff really matters, like non-dualism or dualism, or I can
you let it go.
yeah, you just let it go. None of it matters. It's just really about just catching that whiff of that love affair, in that longing, and just wanting to be as close as possible to that nectar of devotion. And that's just something that gets, if we're blessed enough to have an experience of have our heart be open to that, in those moments, none of that intellectual stuff even really matters. And so that poem really kind of was born out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, weren't you, when you were living there, it says in here, were you living like a little outside sort of little tent situation, or a little, really close to the land? I mean, pretty amazing from what it sounds like on the surface.
Yeah. So when I moved into the house, so before moving into the house, I was in this bamboo hut in the jungle, just like 3 miles down the road. Because when I first came to Maui, I was Ram Dass's gardener, and I would walk over and I would work in his garden. And when I got that job, I literally thought I'd hit the jackpot. I like being Ram Dass's gardener felt like just the heavens parting. And
well, it's very poetic, in a lot of ways.
Right. And then they asked me to move in, and just, it blew my mind. When I went to Maui, I didn't even know that was a possibility. So my chanting practice was so important to me, and I wanted to be able to chant whenever I wanted. And so they let me build this kind of tent structure at the bottom of the property. I was living in the house, but I was spending a good few hours a day out there just chanting. So that's what that kind of tent structure was. I wasn't living out there, but I was just spending a huge percentage of my day there.
Wow. Yeah. I would imagine, like, I've heard several stories, like Vishnu Das, who I'm sure you know,
Sure.
Who told me he came to Maui with 2 suitcases and Ram Dass's phone number, and then they became good friends. And like yourself, a lot of people whose paths it was drawn there, and it's happened. But I would also imagine, and even from the short time I was there, I witnessed a lot of strange characters and a lot of people who were drifting in that my energy was a little like, whoa, who is this? Like, this is a little wild. And I can't imagine how that was just constantly people who just roll in or find the place or whatever, or just the number of requests of like, I need to see him. And there's a lot of like energetic vampires out there. People who aren't really sure about their own intentions and energy. Uh, that must have been nonstop. How did they work with who gets to come and how to make boundaries around that?
Well, that's where Dasima's job really was important. Um, I, and actually, so before I moved in, I was Ram Dass's gardener. And, at that point in time, I got to have my first kind of one-on-one sit down with him. And, we spent a couple hours and just totally took me into that place of loving awareness, right? That he just commonly did for people. And then he said, that we could work together again. And I told Dasima, and basically the invitation never came, I kept like, oh, I want to get back in there. I want to get back in, I want to. But as I was working in the garden, I saw so many people coming and going. And I saw this sense that basically everyone was coming to see Ram Dass to get something. And I don't know, there was just this moment of awakening where I saw that like my job is to be of service to him. And, and that was, I had my own struggle and journey with that. But it was shortly after I had that, it was an internal realization. It wasn't something I vocalized externally. It was shortly after that I got the invitation to move in and to be a caregiver. And so that really kind of carried me, is just this sense of like my job is to be of service. And that's why, when I say, Dasima and how much I learned from her, she really didn't ask much of Ram Dass. I mean, she really, truly was there to serve him. And that meant sometimes being a really fierce gatekeeper. And she had these certain things that she watched out for. If she knew that someone was really into psychedelic experiences or things like that, the gates would be a bit harder. Mm-hmm. And it's because, in her mind, and I think she probably saw this a lot, there was a lot of people that was the depth of how they related to Ram Dass. And from her experience, she saw that those weren't necessarily the best people to have around. But there was people like me and Vishnu Das and a whole lot of other people that, and you, right? The psychedelics were a big part of our path, but we were able to make our way through Dasima's gatekeeping and, to be in that space. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question with that.
Yeah, man. But... No, totally. I was just thinking back, I mean, matter of fact, now that you say it, it reminds me, the very first day I walked in, they're doing the kirtan, the weekly kirtan, and I think someone invited me, and I had just arrived the day or two before, so that was my first time walking in the house, and there's a lot of people there, and whoever brought me there, I think it was Rita. Rita brought me in.
Okay.
And Rita said, she introduced me to Ram Dass, which is very kind. And I'm a little like, okay, wow, whoa. And then she said, sit down right here, like next to him. And he was in his wheelchair, on the end of the couch. I'm just sitting next to him. I'm like, wow, I feel so special. And I'm just sitting here. And I lasted about a few minutes until Dasima came over, who I didn't really know yet, and said, you're crowding him. You need to move. And she pointed to the back of the corner, and then she pushed me, and I had to go sit in the back corner for the whole kirtan. And I thought, I was told to sit here. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. She immediately just like booted me, like, you're out, and your energy is too much. I'm like, I'm just sitting here. We patched it up. But, of course I was thinking like, oh my God, I blew it with this woman. Like, I have to come back here in 2 days, and I'm supposed to ask her basically to let me in. But it's sort of the cosmic joke too. It's like how everything, you want it to be one way and it starts being another way.
Yeah.
So did Ram Dass give you your name, Sitaram Das?
He did. Yeah. And actually, Vishnu Das, he plays a big role in my name because do you know what
Me
do
too.
you, okay,
Yeah.
I want to hear yours in a minute then. Do you know what Vishnudas went by before he got the name Vishnudas?
He told me, tell me, because, well, it's a long story. What is it?
It's his name was Ubi, which is an
Ubi? How do you
acronym.
spell that?
OOBE. I like you're writing this down.
Ubi. That can't possibly be his birth name.
No, it
That's
was
just what he
not his.
went by.
That's what he went by. That's how I met him. It's an acronym for out of box experience.
What was his birth name? Do you know his first name?
Blake.
Blake. Okay. Ubi. Okay.
So, so Ubi at the time, he asks Ramdas for a name, and he gets the name Vishnudas, and it just awakened so much in me, so many questions. And like, I was jealous of him for having a name and just all this, like, do I want a name? And oh no, it's, that's just my ego. What's the point of even having a name? Like, is there any purpose at
Yeah.
all? And
Yeah.
but I still wanted it. And this went on for an entire year, basically just internally, not talking about it with anyone, just like stewing in it. And when I finally decided that I needed to leave Maui, which was because I met, my current partner who I'm still with, and that just changed things. I knew I was leaving, and it's getting closer, and that sense of that name, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, I just decided that it still didn't make sense to me. I didn't know what the point of it was, but I just knew I had to ask him. And so a couple of weeks before I moved out, I asked Ramdas for a name, and and then he invited me, in front of the puja table in the living room when one came to him, and he gave me the name, and it just felt so right. And everyone relates to their names differently. Some people, they take it and they don't necessarily go by it. Some people go by it in this situation, but not in this. And for me, I just wanted to hear the sound. I mean, part of it is, Sitaram for me, that's like the highest name of God. So it's like my favorite sound to hear. So I just wanted to hear it as much as I could. And so I just, in all aspects of my life, I mean, my parents still call me Ken, which is my birth name, which is fine. I'm not going to make people like my parents call me something different, but that's what I go by. It just feels like home. Yeah.
Yeah, and the word itself, the sound, for myself, when I hear Krishna, it's sort of like a spiritual call to arms for myself. It's this mantra that's spoken
Yeah.
to me, and
Yeah.
to them they're just saying it. But to me, it's like I have my own baggage with another name, another sound, and now that I'm more used to the new one, it's what a trip when I hear the old one. And I'm like, oh, right. That has a whole nother energy to it. And they're just names. But
Right.
one is sort of like calling something to me. Like, it's sort of, it's full of opportunity to me and newness.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a reminder. For me, it's a reminder of how I want to be in the world, how I want to show up for myself, how I want to show up for others,
Right.
of being in service. Any moment, Sitaram can be that reminder that God, the most glorious, just bliss filled, that it's right now, in the midst of my anger, in the midst of my doubts, in the midst of my
Yeah.
anxiety, whatever's going on, that priceless gem of existence, it's right here, right now. And the fact that there can just be this reminder built into even our names, that's an incredible thing.
Yeah, it truly is. And Vishnu Das, for me, I met him when I was there, and I think he invited me over to his house. He's a younger guy and has an interesting story. And we were just just there, just talking, and he just said out of the blue, like, you could ask Ram Dass for a name. And I was just like, what do you mean? It's like, that's what I mean. He's like, he gave me my name, and if it feels right to you. And I was just kind of blown away by this idea. I was like, wow. I certainly had never thought about that. And now it was planted in my head. And so similar to me, it was the last day. And I was like, this is it. If you're going to ask, this might be the last chance. And so it really was the perfect time to ask, because we were still, it was just myself and him and my partner, Radha. And we'd finished recording. So we kind of gotten all this great stuff in the can. And I thought I might as well ask. But I've told this story before. It was a bumbling request, of just nonsense, of all these disclaimers, like, we don't have to, but if you're feeling like it. But I'm not saying that I want it, but it's not like, it's cool if you don't. And he's just, nodding his head. And I finally stammer it all out. And then he's just nodding, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure, okay, I said it, and there was nothing happening. So I was just like, okay. And then I went through that whole thing you spoke about of like, I mean, why do I need a name, and who am I to ask? And I have a name, and I also have this performance name, and like, this is ridiculous. And 5 or 10 minutes went by, and I've now had gone through the whole cycle of like, I don't want a name. It's over. Moved on. Leave it. Because he's now is doing that thing that you speak about. He had returned to the ocean view, and his beads and his eyes were open. And I thought, like, it seemed like he was kind of just running some mantra. He had moved on. He's like, now I'm onto this. We did the recording. Now moving on in life. And about 10 minutes later, he just said Krishna. And I still didn't understand. I had moved on. I was like, I thought people were singing down the hall. And I was like, oh, is that a song or something? And he's like, Krishna. I was just dumb as a brick, and I'm like, would you like me to get someone for you? And Rado was like, that is your name. And then I all kind of hit me, and I was crying, of course, and just totally stunned. And man, I was so impatient, and I was like a little bumblebee, making requests and moving on. He's just like processing. Let me drop into the space, let me listen. And answer your question. And it was so humbling. And then I was freaked out that aphasia had kicked in and there was more to the name. And I was like, I'm about to leave. So I was like, are you sure? And he says it like a third time with a big smile. And then I said a fourth time, I said, well, you mean like Sting or like Cher? It's just one word. And then he thought that was hilarious, and he's just laughing, and he's like, Krishna. So I wanted to be sure. I thought that would be the ultimate joke if, 20 years later, someone's like, oh, no. He always said, and I'm like, are you serious? I've been doing this for 20 years,
Yeah. That's good. Well, it's good that you asked. There's moments when sometimes Ram Dass would say things and I didn't ask, and now I still think about them. And I was like, why didn't I ask more about that? I'm curious, has your name deepened for you since Ram Dass left his body?
Well, I mean, it happened in such a compressed time that I would say it's deepened, and I'm not sure if it's connected to him leaving his body or not, but I will say that like my relationship to him has continued to grow.
Yeah.
And felt very alive. And it's imbued with the fact that I'm still involved with performing his words and working with the foundation and people reaching out to me about the work, and so me speaking about like this conversation. So it's sort of like it's very alive in the sense that it's active in my life, but I feel like the teaching of it, I think what you're speaking to, and Maharaji sort of, I blend it all together, has absolutely deepened on a personal level, continued and gotten richer, and it feels very alive.
Yeah. For me, it just everything has taken on a deeper meaning. Just my love for Ram Dass, the name, the teachings, the practices I do, just recognizing that they're all connected to him, and it's this. I still don't know how to explain it. I've tried. I could put different, even spiritual belief systems around this, but they all feel cheap. Even just the sense that I feel closer to Ram Dass now than I did when I lived at the house with him. And I think actually what you just spoke to, that's a big part of how this stuff works, right? Like you're, because of the music that you're doing and just you're like Ram Dass is like, that presence is always there because you're engaged in practices, right, that keep that alive. Um, when we think about like beings like Neem Karoli Baba, right, and like reading those stories, and or why we would read the stories of Krishna, right, these beings, we often think of it as, oh, this is a spiritual practice that we want to do because it's good for us, right? That's how we often think about these things. Like, why would I sit down at my puja table and sing these names?
It's like a vitamin. Yeah.
Right. That's how we often think of it. But what you just pointed to, right, is by you keeping Ram Dass's presence alive, by having conversations with me right now, by the work that you're doing, the music, that's keeping your heart open. I mean, it's basically like we do these things because we want to, because we love someone. And it just so happens that that person that we love is a person who reminds us that this love is always here. It actually captures what the path is really about. Like lineage and satsang, like when we think about lineage and these things being passed down and why we want to honor tradition, and that can sound so rigid, right? But it's just love. Basically, people passed down, like Ram Dass and Raghu and Krishnas, they all loved Neem Karoli Baba and were touched by that. And then through our relationship with them and the stories, like now we fall in love with that. And then we recognize that goes back to this tradition. It goes back thousands of years, and it's all passed down with love. And then in our satsang, we all love the same things. And so when we talk about this thing that we all love together, it brings that presence alive. And just right now, us saying the names of Krishna and Sitaram and Neem Karoli Baba and Ram Dass and loving awareness, like, because we're both on this path and we're bringing these names into the space, it's alive. Like I feel it right now. Like this is, a real quote spiritual practice, but we're just both doing the thing that we want to do because we love it. And that's really the heart, I think, of the spiritual path. In fact, could I read another poem?
You may. And I have to say, it hits me so strongly that you're still tending the garden. I mean, that is how you tend the garden. And you're still Ram Dass's gardener to allow these things to continue to flourish and grow season upon season.
So the reason why I just thought of this is because it actually captures this essence of what I was just talking about, right? This sense of doing something because we think it's good for us versus realizing that it's the fruit itself. And practice is like that, right? In general, sometimes I sit and I chant and I'm just doing it because I think I should. Oh, I haven't chanted today. And sometimes it's like that. But the reason why we do those practices is because sometimes we can actually see. And so this poem is a love song to a sound, the sound Sitaram. And it's called Sitaram. The way Si stretches the lips to a smile, how Ta drops the jaw and the eyebrows raise in delight. We often think of ecstasy as the pinnacle of pleasure, but it's really a fierce melt into horror and bliss. And that's just one moment in the river of sound, Ra. Its alluring current swallows and dissolves. The merciful nature is revealed when despair dawns at the river's end, an aching heart softened by a low, soothing rumble. Maharaji gave me faith, unveiled, unyielding grace. Ram Dass opened the bottomless well of the human heart, and Sitaram provides the perfect form to contain it all. Faith, grace, and love. A sonic murti formed by my own lips, by whose feet I fall with the breast's rising tide. Sitaram, sometimes I think you're a practice, but in truth, you're the reward.
Thank you. Beautiful. How do people get this if they would like to have their own copy?
Absolutely. So the easiest thing to do is if you go to fromandforgod.com, that is the book page, and it makes it really simple, all the different links. So, if you prefer to buy it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you can do that. If you want to order it through IndieBound, so you can have it sent to your own local bookstore, you can do that. You can also buy it directly from our Kripa store or the Hanuman Maui store. But all those links are right there at fromandforgod.com. Yeah.
Cool. And the money you said is going towards 2 causes? All of it?
Yes. So 100% of the money goes to Hanuman Maui, which is a 501c nonprofit that I spoke to earlier. And Kripa, our service projects, we're under their fiscal sponsorship. So half of the money donated will go directly for our outreach work. And could I take a couple of minutes just to talk a little bit more about the work that we're doing?
Yeah.
So, like I said earlier, we are engaged in making sure that we work to lower the barriers of access to devotional and contemplative practices such as kirtan. And that language is important to us because we don't see ourselves as providing access. We see that the reason that not everyone has equal access is because collectively, as a society, we've made decisions that block people out, right? So we're working to rectify that. And the simplest, most obvious way is just making sure that anyone, no matter what their financial ability is, that they have access. But we also do direct outreach to people in the prison system. Obviously, with COVID, we can't currently go in and do kirtans in prisons. But we've kind of shifted gears like a lot of people. And we've been really enjoying doing letter writing, handwritten letter writing to people, and then sending books that might be helpful for people on their paths, and just sharing a little bit about our lives and answering whatever questions that we can. So we do that work, and then also, offering one-on-one spiritual support. So outside of this, I work as a counselor. So I have a lot of experience with that, but really the core of it is just because I've seen what Ram Dass did for me, and I don't claim to be the same as Ram Dass, but I just know the power of when people get together on the spiritual path and open our hearts to each other. And I just recognize that there's a lot of people that are very isolated from satsang, don't have safe spaces where they can share. And so we offer donation-based spiritual support to anyone who reaches out. So that's the work that we're engaged in. And so this book, the money is going directly to those 2 streams to keep Ram Dass's presence alive on Maui. And then also, Ram Dass is the core of the service work that we're doing. And this is really our way of keeping Ram Dass's presence alive in our own hearts by, one, us still being able to spend time together, right? Me and a few of the other caregivers. And so we can keep Ram Dass's memory alive and presence alive that way. And 2, by engaging in his teachings through service and devotion.
How do you offer that one-on-one support if people do? You said if they reach out, how do they reach out?
Yeah, so Kripa's website is kripa.guru. And
how do you spell that?
KRIPA.guru, GURU.
There's a .guru? No way.
Yeah, there is.
Of course
we
there
found
is.
it. Of course there is. It felt too good to be true because, for us, that name Kripa, which it means grace, for us, there's a term Guru Kripa, which is the grace of the Guru. And that is my core worldview. And it's one that's sometimes harder to talk about because on the outside it can sound cultish, but it's really just this understanding of this worldview of grace that Ram Dass often invited us into, that that if we're willing, at any moment we can see that all of this is the play of the divine, the play of the guru, the inner guru, and that each moment is grace. And so for us, that name, it just captures the core of all of it, because even the fact that we're together and that we're friends and that we're able to do this service work, we have no doubt whatsoever that it's the guru's grace, that it is Maharaji at the core. And now, of course, for me, Ram Dass is a part of that grace. So when we found that was a website, it felt too good to be true.
Cool, man. Well, that's really beautiful. Thank you for offering all this and sharing a bit about its creation and your story. It's fun to hear.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And I think we probably just miss each other a couple times over the years when you would come over to the house. And so, I'm grateful. Just finally have a moment just to, hang out a little bit. And I imagine at some point post-COVID, we'll see each other in person.
Right on. Thanks, brother.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Sitaram Das, for coming on the show. It always warms my heart to get into that world and those stories and to hear more about yours. It's beautiful. Check out his world. His website there is in the show notes, and it'll take you to all the things he's doing. And this song you're hearing in the background is from him, and this is a version of the Hanuman Chalisa, I believe. If you don't know about the Hanuman Chalisa, I'm certainly no expert on it, but basically it's a devotional song that, just like singing it, just listening to it, but if you are to sing it, it's a kind of prayer that is, let's just say, very benevolent and beneficial for all beings. Radha actually has put herself through the dedication of memorizing the entire thing to be able to play it herself, which she has done, and it's not a small feat. I think it takes, some people up to a year to memorize all the words, because they don't repeat, and they're not the kind of thing you don't know those words. Let's put it that way. But the sound of them themselves, like the actual sound of that vibration of those actual sounds and words, is part of the magic of the Chalisa. So, but there's many different ways to go about performing it and playing it, and this is one of them. So I should probably stop talking so that you can fully dive into this if you like. But thank you again for listening and providing reviews and subscribing. And thank you to everyone on our council, patreon.com/East Forest. Everyone on the East Forest Council, I appreciate that extra support. It's a way to support this podcast and this overall mission and work of the East Forest ecosystem. And I want to say a special thank you to all those folks out there. All right, you guys keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do it with grace.
सूक्ष्म रूप धरि सिया दिखावा विकट रूप धरि लंग जरावा भीम रूप धरि असुर संहारे रामचंद्र के गाज संवारे लाय सजीवन लखन जियाये श्री रघुबीर रसिया लाये रघुपति कीन्ही बहुत बड़ाई तुम मम प्रिय भरताहि सम भाई सहस बदन तुम्हारा jasa gawe asagahi Shri Bhakti Gandhala gawe sanika dika brahmadi munisa narad sharad sahita ahisa yama kubera dika balajande gapi gopit gahe sake kahande tuma upakara sagri wahingin ha rama milaya raja paradin ha tumharo mantra vibhishana mama Langeshwara bhaye sab jag jana yuga sahasra yojana parabhanu lilyo dahi madhura phalajanu prabhu mutrika mele mukhamahin jalad hilang higaye Surajanahi Durgam Kaja Jagat Ke Jete Sugamanugraha Tumhore Dete Rama Duare Tumarakoare Hotanagya Bino Besare Sab sukh lahe tumhari sharana tumra chak gahu go darna apan tejas sumharo ape dino loka ankatengambe bhuta pisacha nigatana hingawe mahabir japanama sunawe naseroga hare sababiram japata nirandara anumatavira sangatate anumana charawe manakrama bachana dhyana jolawe sabbarama tabasviraja dinake gaja sakala tumasaja ora manorathajo goelawe soyamita jiwana phalabhawe charum yuga tumhara he parasiddha jagat jiara sadhu sant ke tum rakhoare asara nigandan rama dulare ashta siddhino nidhi ke data asparadina janaki mata ram rasayan tumhare pasa sada raho raghupati ke dasa tumhare bhajana ram go pawe janam janam ke dukh bisarawe antakal raghubar bur jaye jahan janma hari bhakt kahai aur devata chitan dharai hanumat se sarv sukh garai sankat kate mite sab bir kripa graho gurudeva ki nahi jo satabara patakara goe judahi bandi mahasukho joya havare hanumana chalisa hoya siddhi sakhi gaurisa tulasi dasa sada hare chera kije nath hridaya mahandera bhavanatanaya sangata harana mangala murati rupa rama lakhana sita sahita hridaya pasahu surabhupasya vararama chandra parajesharinam mangalamurati marutanandana sakala mangalamulani gandana mangalamurati marutanandana sakala mangala mulani gandana mangalamurati marutanandana sakala mangalamulani gandana mangalamurati marutanandana sakala mangala mulani gandana Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Sitaram 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 Jaya Sitaram 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 Jaya Sitaram Sitaram Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, 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 Jaya Sitaram, Siyavar Ramachandra Parajay Sharanam,